All right, well, welcome everyone. It's the end of September. Oh my gosh. What's going on? Let's slow down, everyone. Slow down. Yeah, does it feel like it's just going super, super fast here? This is kind of the fall, isn't it? The leaves change colors, and then like 3 days later, leaves are all gone, kind of that speed. So be present, because things shift super fast this time of the year. And I think kind of wanted to start there also. Fall is an interesting time, especially September. And I would say like mid-October, depending on where you live, obviously. But where we live in Colorado, we still have the hot during the day. It's pretty warm. We have to make sure that we're not letting the too much of a hot air coming inside. So we shut the windows, but then evenings and the mornings, it's cooler. So, but what happens is that our internal body too gets a little pulled. So this is the in-between time, right? It's, yes, technically we're in fall. Yes, it feels like it in the Northern Hemisphere. In Southern Hemisphere, yes, it certainly starts to feel like a spring, but we're still in between time for I would say, let me muscle test on this, but at least 2 more weeks or so for most of us. Okay, so what that means is that if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, you want to not go full into eating too much, like too many apples every day and too many squash soups, like pumpkin soups and things like that quite yet. Okay. Pull back a little bit, maybe eat a little lighter for the summertime kind of a food for maybe lunch or so. You can start to introduce a little bit of like a garden vegetable. If you're harvesting zucchinis and things like that, you can make garden vegetable soups and things. But I would still make the soup broth from maybe a little more like a vegetable broth instead of having full on bone broth. So maybe a mixture or something like that, because we're in between time. Okay. And I'm bringing this up, and I will address the Southern Hemisphere too briefly too, but I'm bringing this up because I was just talking to a client today, and, we're staying in touch, but we didn't connect with like what she's been doing with her foods and maybe her supplements and things like that since early January. So I told her, I said, that's a long time not to be in touch, right? So she was still eating things that I recommended for December and January and maybe even into February kind of a diet. And so it was becoming too heavy for her, of course, right? She was having digestive issues because of that too. And so we didn't connect on doing her session till today. And, one of the things that I really emphasize with all of you is that you've got to live with seasons. Okay. Just because the certain things I recommended in January, it worked for you then, it might've worked for you till end of March. That doesn't mean it works for you during the summer months or in this in-between season time right now. So be very, very aware of what feels right to you, because you have been you the longest. I have not been you. Okay. So number 1, trust yourself the most. Number 2, really pay attention to what's seasonally available right now. Okay. Berries are starting to come to the end, right? There's some blueberries and things are still, you can get them, raspberries and things like that. Cause I remember living in northern Minnesota and I could go harvest a little bit more. But this is coming to an end, right? So our fruit changes are happening, vegetable changes are happening, but we're in between. So don't go heavy duty on too much red meats and too much bone broth and too much butter. Even though I love all that stuff, you can't go crazy on that right now. That'll just weigh you down, and that's going to create indigestion in your body that will tend to show up as more like burp, acid reflux, density, feel heavy, all those things. Okay. So it's a balance right now. And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, you're going from kind of the dense foods, warming foods, bodies that require a little bit more fats, to slowly moving towards like a spring greens, right? Early spring greens. So maybe some asparagus, some starting to come in, right? Maybe dark green leafy things are a little bit bitter that's coming in. So it's not that you want to go full on salad, but maybe you begin to do, okay, maybe I'll do 60% cooked vegetables and maybe 40% little bit of a sprinkling some raw vegetables back in. Okay. So those are the things that you want to begin to shift into. And if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, springtime, you may want to pull back a little bit on too much heaviness with protein, right? And then lighten up the protein using maybe soaked beans and hemp seeds and such and such. Okay. So just be very cautious about what you're doing. You don't want to get monotonous. Okay. You do not want to just repeat the same thing over and over and over. And I don't know if I've ever told you, everyone, but I broke up with this one guy one time because he ate the same thing. I went grocery shopping with him once, and he had the same thing that he picked up every single time. And I asked him, I said, do you buy this all year? And he said, yep, that's exactly what I buy. And I was like, all right, never mind. This is not going to jive very well. So it's that important to have a seasonality in your life. Okay. So look around. This is a good time to even change out. This sounds kind of a little strange to some of you, but change out some paintings in your house, like change locations of the paintings. You may have like 5 pieces, but rotate them. Okay. You may want to change the colors of the throw pillows that you have on your sofa to maybe a more fall colors. So red and orange and yellow instead of more green and blue, that tone. So that could be a nice way to bring seasonal changes. So this is the time of the year that my dad would actually go and finds all his paintings, scrolls that he collected in Japan. I remember him doing this, and he would change it to the fall one from the summer one. And I always wondered, that's interesting. But he says, well, that's because the season has changed. The artwork must change also. So see what you can do around your space to welcome the shift, because that's exactly what's happening inside you. All right. Chris, you have anything to chime in before we go into our topic today?
Just that this is a really good tie-in to what we're going to talk about today, because it's all about not getting stuck on the way things always were. And I think that that's something we can remind ourselves of visually in our own space by giving ourselves different perspectives, even on familiar things. So like you were saying, with shifting the artwork, or just so all of you know, one of Masami's favorite hobbies to recruit me and sometimes our best friend into is to move around the furniture in our house. So reorganizing the living room or the bedroom or, one of the other rooms. And so that's often a common thing. We do it at least 3 times a year, if not seasonally. So yeah, but
I'm sorry I do that, Chris.
no, but I think that just as a practice, I mean, it truly physically forces you into a different way of experiencing a familiar space. So for me, what I notice is when we change the locations of our furniture and we sit down, or we've changed artwork around, we do that regularly. When you sit and you look from a different view, you notice different things. You see things that, something you've known for years, decades even, and suddenly you're noticing new details about it. And that's really what the theme of today is all about. So why don't we just go right into it? Hang on, I gotta send you one little message.
Well, yeah. And did you send me something?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, I didn't see that. Sorry, I would look at it.
That's okay. Whenever you can get to it. So just moving into the topic, I'm going to hand it over to Masami in a minute. But before we do that, I'm going to just mention the retreat really quickly, if you don't mind. So we talked about it last week. We're very excited to have this, the long weekend retreat. That's long, not long, but long weekend retreat. And I just want to know, does anybody right now feel like they're a little breathless at times? Have you noticed this? I've caught myself actually holding my breath. And part of it is just, maybe it's waiting for the other shoe to drop, that kind of feeling, wondering what's going to happen next, wondering how all of the chaos that seems to be out there is going to settle somehow. And so a big part of this, which I'm really excited about, first of all, is that we don't have to wait. we can actually start to initiate the balance internally within ourselves without having to wait for external circumstances to match what we like. So that's one of the things about this retreat that we're really excited to explore. And for me personally, it's going to be a chance for me to uh, dust off my harmonium and bring that out and share it with all of you. So we've had a lot of great response for people signing up, but we're going to keep that that window open. I'm going to put up the link here just a moment here. And just a reminder, it's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So it begins on Friday evening for about an hour, 15 minutes to an hour and a half to get us settled in, set the tone, start into that reflective state that we want to experience to bring the stillness, bring the silence. And then Saturday and Sunday are going to take us more deeply into some practice that we can settle into and just really, really absorb into our being. Because this is such a time, our lungs are such mediators between the inside and the outside. You know, Masami's talked about this a lot, the heaven and the earth balancing out. And we'll talk more about that in the retreat. But one last thing I want to say is I didn't mention it last time, but today I'm going to mention the price is $97 for all 3 days. And we also have a 2 payment option available. So if you'd like to split it up from the time you sign up and then the second one will come a month later, that's also fine. And we invite you to use either option. So just wanted to plug that for a minute. The link is up if you haven't had a chance to check it. And thank you to everyone who's already signed up. And I'll hand it back to Masami.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And I'm very excited because Chris is going to share his musical intuitive expressions because he expresses himself through music. So that's going to be a part of this that I'm very excited because vocalizing is very important for the lung opening. And, you know, the breathlessness or even the dry lung feelings that you feel if you live in Northern Hemisphere is because we're going from the heat of the summer, the hot, dry for the Western side of the United States, maybe a little bit more wet and humid on the other side. But you are collecting a lot of that kind of internal pitta energy, which is the heat energy. And that is taking us towards Vata season. Vata is the more of the kind of the blowing wind, drying. So that can be really tough on our lungs. That's why we start to feel a little bit phlegmy for some of us, but some of us feel like a dry cough can come up where you'll be talking and then you start to go, I need to just drink some water because there's a dry spot in my throat. Those are some of the things that you may notice this time of the year. So lungs are the key. It's actually the largest organ of elimination organ. It's the largest elimination organ. You might think of large intestine, you know, you might think of some other ways that you eliminate, but it's actually the lungs. Lungs do about 60% of the elimination of your body. So that's why you want to support the lungs early on in the season so you don't get the asthma, you don't get the allergies, you don't have the winter flus, you don't get that cough and phlegmy stuff later on in the season, like into the winter. So you want to always start with your lungs, even though, you know, liver is important, even though your large intestine, small intestine are very, very important. Those are also elimination organs. But if the lungs are not happy, you're not connected between the heaven and earth. So that's, you know, something to keep in mind, everyone.
Before you go on, I want to just read one quick thing that came in from a client to Masami, and it's really reflective of this two-way struggle that so many of us are feeling, getting pulled and feeling like we maybe are doing battle, or that there are things out there, the forces are swallowing us up. And so this was just a nice comment that came in. And she said, "Hi, Masami, what a trailblazer and guiding light you are. So appreciative of what you're doing and your help and hope you gave me to get through my battle. It's not over, I know. You showed me being a warrior is possible, like David and Goliath." So if you've been feeling a little bit like David facing down the giant, and there are all of these odds stacked against you, this is a really good time to reignite your internal fire and connect with that again, and just reacquaint yourself with, what are you here for? What are you really here for? What are you being called to do at this time?
Mm. Yeah. And, I really appreciated that email. I do receive some emails like this, and it just cheers me up. Chris sees me just kind of get fueled by these lovely emails I get. And so I appreciate it. And, just a little side note about this particular client is that she's been to so many people. She told me for the last 13 years, she's been looking for answers, and she's been to a lot of intuitives, medical this, or, people that will read different energy fields, channelers, past lives and everything. And she's been told that it's her stuck karma. She was told that over and over, karma, the past lives. And when I started working with her, I immediately knew that I need to work on her mold, fungus, and yeast. So I actually had her do a mold testing in her house, in her apartment. And I mean, we were both in tears when we saw the results that came back, because I kept saying to her, we cannot go down the road of karmic stuff right now. We've got to address your apartment because it's full of mold and fungus, and I can feel it, and that you're having a major issues inside your body. And that's why it's showing up in her heart. It was showing up in her lungs. I mean, it was really making her not operate well on this earth, even though she is just this beauty, and she's a nurse, and she just gives and gives and gives to the world. But when the Petri dishes came back and we saw the results together, I could barely believe it, because the test basically had a little acronym on it. And it said too many to count, meaning she had mold and fungus that was taking over her whole entire apartment. I think they counted up to 78 different species or something along that line. And after that, they said too many to count. So, we're in the process of, not everybody can just pitch they can just pack up everything and leave. I mean, that's where I almost went with her. I even suggested that could be the solution. I don't know, but what can we do? So I've recommended some cleaning products, the candles she can use, essential oils she can use. We're working on her inner body. She's waking up to her fullest potential. I'm just really proud of her for going through this. And she sent me 2 photos of funny things, and I'm just going to share it because, she told me that, this is an interesting thing that I could share, is that she has this orchid that loves living in her apartment. And orchids will bloom all year long in her environment. And this is like Midwest. Okay. This is not meant to be like a orchid land. Okay. It's a cold place she lives in, but she has orchids blooming like a tropical island all year. And she has another thing of a cactus that just keeps popping up all kinds of babies. And so she keeps sending me these photos. And yes, first it's funny. I told her, she said, what should I do? I think they're feeding off of my mold. And I said, I think they are. They're definitely eating your mold and fungus in your apartment. But instead of getting rid of them, we are actually cherishing these 2 plants and thanking them, because they're actually clearing her apartment with her. So please send her love, lots of light. She is slowly getting better. This has been a journey, 13 years of journey for her, but she's doing it. She is powerful beyond what I can even recognize, because she's stuck with it. She's still doing it. She's not giving up. So good for her. So if you've been always told that this is karmic or this is past lives, yes, they are important, everyone. But also, please look at your environment. So this is a great time to rearrange your furnitures, that maybe take out the old paintings that you've always had and dust off the backside. Maybe there's some mold growth there. We don't know till you actually start to, change things around in your house, right? So for those reasons, I think it's important. And several of you commented, Samantha said, I love that you're saying this. People always laugh at me that I change curtains, pillows, bedspreads, etc. every season. Oh, I'm not laughing. I think it's great. I love it. So keep going. And Ilka says, we are totally changing, moving on October 15th. Oh, well, I'm glad. I'm happy to hear that. New place, new furniture. Great. And then Diana says, as an interior redesigner. Oh, redesigner. That's a cool. I did not know that there's a redesigner. Yeah, that sounds great. Changing out decor to match the season is my passion. Yeah, I love you and I need to talk because I love doing that. That's one of my like a little side gig. It's an easy way to stay in the present season. Yes, doesn't it? Yeah. So, okay, Mary Bassett says, oh, that's amazing. I know. I'm so happy for her that she's clearing her environment. So please, the external environment becomes you, okay? And the internal environment will reflect back. So it goes both directions. Please don't avoid that topic of mold, fungus, and yeast. This is a real issue right now. Particularly, it doesn't even matter where you live, okay? But if you've been experiencing hurricanes this year, you've had lots of rain, you've had some flooding issues around you or even in your basement, please go and take a look. And if you need more information on getting these Petri dishes to check it, just please email me through the website because I will be able to guide you with this one company that I use. And they're great people. They will do 101, 1 hour free consultation with you as well after you get tested. And it's about $33 per room. So, you can just start with your own bedroom, something like that. Okay. And so, sorry, I kind of went into different direction, but I think in a way it ties in with the diagnosis and prognosis idea, right? So the diagnosis for this lady was, hey, you got to deal with your karma. This is the karmic connections. This is something stuck in your past. And you're just looping your karma. And yeah, that could be the diagnosis that maybe some of you have received. I have certainly received that kind of a recommendations or thoughts that you could call it the diagnosis. And the prognosis was based on that for her was like years of working through karma, 13 years of working with karma, signing up for this, doing this kind of energy healing, following this kind of energy work. But for her, I think there's an in-between place. It's just because you got karmic looping going on, that doesn't mean that your life will have to fall apart this way. Okay. There's something in between. I think there's a space in between where you can get a little bit more back into your physical body, back into your environment. What can you do today that could make a significant difference in your life? And it could mean that maybe I just need to hydrate a little bit more before I begin to address my karma, right? Maybe I need to go to bed half an hour earlier before I begin to address these diagnoses. So when I was diagnosed with MS 10 years ago, the doctor that gave me that diagnosis had tears in his eyes. And I was actually going up to him and saying, it'll be all right. It'll be all right. I'm going to be fine. And he just looked at me surprisingly because he was like, well, there are a lot of good medications out there for MS and we can kind of start looking at it. And I didn't want to shut that down for him either. So I just said, maybe we can talk about this later on after I do a little bit more MRIs and maybe I can look into different ways. But as we were going home, I said to Chris, I said, let's get busy and start taking care of ourselves. Let's literally change the way we've been operating inside our bodies. And let's clean out everything. We had been cleaning out our diet for a while at that point, but I said to Chris, I said, let's really do this because there's got to be a space between the diagnosis and your prognosis. Basically, people that get diagnosed with MS, it's grim. Okay. It's like a slow death. And like I said on my email, I've worked with many people with MS. So, and at that time when I got diagnosed, I was actually working with 3 women who had been diagnosed with MS for maybe 10 years prior to, and each of them actually could not even get out of bed anymore. And they were using wheelchairs to get around. So I thought, okay, this could be the future of me but there's got to be a space in between here. And this is where you want to get creative. This is where you want to come back to the seasonality of life and come back to balance within you and take a really deep look at, what am I doing to my inner being? And I think it requires a lot of self-search when that kind of a diagnosis comes in, and then soon followed by, you only have this many months to live, or, well, this is going to look really difficult for you, but here are some medications and here are some tools. There's got to be something in between. All right. So I just wanted to mention that. Chris, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there's what I remember from that moment of when you were diagnosed is we were walking back into our house, and I remember this feeling of completely not knowing what to expect. And this is where so much of what we talk about here, and also what our theme for today is, even with this retrograde theme, which will tie into this as we're going, but it is this idea that it's okay not to know, because actually we really don't know ever. And I remember saying to Masami, just, I don't know what's going to happen, but whatever it is, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I had no idea what that meant. I couldn't have told you what it's going to be okay would look like in 5 years or 10 years. But I felt it very strongly that we would find our way through it, whatever that meant. And not knowing the outcome, not having any promise or guarantee of anything, but that somehow we're still held, we're still in this. And so I'm going to say a couple of things, if you don't mind, here about the topic of diagnosis, prognosis, and even this retrograde idea, this Mercury retrograde. We like to play around with this more and more. I used to be such a skeptic. I mean, Masami will tell you, she would start talking about, oh, Mercury retrograde's coming. I would just roll my eyes, just like, whatever. I don't buy any of that stuff. I don't believe it. And what's funny is she would say, well, okay, that's fine, but just pay attention and see if you notice any funny things happening with communications or emails or your computer. Sure enough, if I started paying attention, I would have this unbelievable amount of trouble with exactly those things. And I've learned to have more of a sense of humor with it, but it was something that I went from being a total skeptic to being just very curious about what's going to happen. And so a couple of things I wanted to say. Masami asked me before we started recording, how would I define the retrograde? And you can get technical about it. If you're looking up in the sky at Mercury, the track of its orbit relative to the Earth for this period of retrograde, it appears in the sky like it's stopped moving one direction and is moving backwards in the sky. It's reversing course is what it looks like. It has to do with the relative positions of Earth and Mercury to the sun. And so we have this period of weeks, usually 2 or 3 times a year, where this cosmic phenomenon is happening in our solar system. And it's funny because we can take it for its symbolic value. And I think that's really what we're aiming for here, is how can we take this time of, let me just throw out some words to you here. If we're looking at this retrograde as something that is reminding us that not everything is linear, not everything is predictable, maybe it's uncomfortable. In fact, we're getting more and more used to that, I think, is the idea of being uncomfortable more of the time as our world changes so fast. And it won't necessarily even be something that we would prefer to have happen, whatever is showing up in our lives. And so if we can take that aspect of what's happening right now, it's just in the sky, Mercury looks like it's moving backwards, and it's a time for us to, like Masami said, move our furniture, shake things up a little bit, take a different perspective, try looking at things in a different way than is habitual. And so one of the things that we were tying this to, so let's bring these topics together a little bit, the diagnosis and prognosis. So this is something that, a diagnosis, if you look at it, usually is going to come from a doctor. I mean, there are other people who can diagnose. A car mechanic can make a diagnostic statement about your engine and transmission. But a diagnosis is basically a description of an imbalance of some kind. The system is out of balance. And sometimes it needs a little bit of help or work to change it. Sometimes it can readjust given time. The prognosis is really looking at just a probability. It's a probability that a certain outcome is going to happen. And when we're talking about prognosis, sometimes it's based on average outcomes. If you're looking at a medical diagnosis, for example, and then the doctor says, well, and the prognosis isn't good. You've got 6 months. Well, this is where the opportunity is, because we can believe that statement absolutely, or we can take it as a relative statement. And so what I want to add is that when we have a prognosis, somebody is saying probably, might, could, may happen, and they give you a very specific description. What we have the choice is to either take it literally and do nothing, in which case whatever they describe to us is much more likely to happen, because it's the default. If we don't do anything, if we don't change course, don't change direction, don't move differently, then that prognosis is much more likely to become possibility, not just probability. But if we're willing to hold it lightly and just say, well, that's one possible outcome, but it's certainly not the only one. And if I move differently and I change how I'm interacting with my world, my environment, then I can generate different outcomes from this one. And I may not know what they are. So just like we were talking about with Masami's MS diagnosis, there is a sense of not knowing, but there is also a sense that it's going to be okay. And so if we can just loosely hold those pieces, we have a description of what has fallen out of balance. We have one idea of how this could play out, but we also have a third option, which is we can do things differently in our own lives that can affect what's happening. So I just wanted to name those things, and I have some other things I could add, but I'll take a pause here and let Masami come back in.
Oh, it's good. Thank you for explaining that, because I wouldn't have been able to explain exactly what happens during this time. And, certainly, of course, double check, triple check your stuff, emails, are you sending it to the right people? But you know what? You kind of should be doing that all the time anyway, right? The world that we're living in right now, you just don't know when things are going to get mixed up. So it's always a good practice. And, this is the time of the year that a lot of people use let's go back and visit the words, right? That starts with like restore, reassess. I wrote some of that in my emails too. Revise, revisit, revamp, and reclaim, even retreat, right? Those are all fantastic. And at the same time, I can go back to when my work has been picked up by different people, and it has somewhat coincided with around the time of Mercury retrograde. Maybe this is because a lot of us that know this tend to retrieve. They tend to not put themselves out there. So this might be your chance, because there'll be less people putting their work out there, that your work might get picked up, right? So I'm actually going to be challenging you to say, don't just do the internal journey for the next 3 weeks, but what is that internal journey is going to look like outward also, if that is where you want to put your work out there. Because I work with a lot of healers and energy workers that are just like saying, I'd love to put myself out there. I like to work a little bit more when I get a little more clients. You know what? Never know. This may actually get you like a boomerang, like you throw it and then it comes back. So that's what I'm going to challenge myself during the next 3 weeks, is instead of going back into myself and just staying in it, I plan on coming out during this 3 weeks. So that is something that I'm going to challenge myself and see if I could work with the planetary energies to support me. And I think that's where, that's, I think, what helped me to heal and ultimately reverse the diagnosis of MS. And the doctor could not believe that I was able to do that. And, it doesn't matter whether he wanted to know how I did it or not, because he wasn't. But the fact is, I decided I was going to go inward and I was going to clear my system out, and I'm going to take this into the world and share. And that heals me every time. So, I say this next 3 weeks, don't just come back in and stay in, but see what you can do out into the world. Maybe talk to your neighbors, maybe talk to your family members about what you're learning, what you're trying to explore. It doesn't have to be you got to go out there and then start videotaping yourself. Okay. It's nothing like that, but really see this a little bit differently. Let's change the way we interact with these planetary shifts. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about it today too. And, many of you that have been diagnosed with something or rather, I'm sure you have been told, oh my gosh, this is going to look like this. If you don't take this antibiotics, then you're going to suffer like this. Or I don't let those things really impact me much anymore. I have had those issues, I just go, okay, well, that's just one possibility, but that isn't the it. So this is where you want to be strong in your inner knowing. This is when you want to use muscle testing. This is when you want to do the pendulum of your body or actual pendulum. Really communicate with your spirits, guides, and your inner knowing to decide, is that it? Is that the only possibility that I'm left with, right? So I really encourage you to use this time, next 3 weeks, and celebrate the fact that the Mercury retrograde is asking you to listen to your inner voice, but don't get stuck in there and retreat completely, but come out of it during the 3 weeks and see what that will open up for you. Because like I said, the roads clear out quite a bit during this next 3 weeks. And Chris used to work for a very well-known publishing company. And I remember him coming home one day and he says, this person had everything ready to go. I sent her the contract. He used to write the contracts for the authors. And he said, this person did not want to sign anything until after Mercury retrograde, and even wanted to wait like another week, and had this like a set calendar that she had to follow. I get it. But I at the same time, I'm a rebel in that case. I've always fought against rules. And growing up in Japan, everything was rules, right? Your bangs had to be this short, or your hair had to be here. Your skirt length had to be this long. And I didn't fit anywhere, right? I didn't have hair like everybody else's. I didn't have skin color like everybody else. So I didn't even fit. And, there's a saying that's called derukui wa utareru. And derukui wa utareru means if you're the nail that sticks out, you get hammered down. Well, I was the nail that was never going to get hammered down because they didn't have a hammer big enough to hammer me down. So if that's the case, right, you begin to think outside the box, Taco Bell's theme, right? Think outside the box. I'm the Taco Bell person. Well, I'll never eat Taco Bell, but you get the point. So I want you to think outside the box, because everybody's trying to kind of go, ooh, this is not the time to sign my contract. This is not the time to look for my next property. Oh, this is not the time to put my work out there. You know what? I say, no, be the nail that sticks out, and don't let any hammer hammer you down. That's what I say for the next 3 weeks. Okay.
Well, I've got some perspective to add on that too. And this gets back to what we were talking about with armoring, which was a big theme of this month. And, for me, what I started to notice, and I want to put this all back in the perspective of what we were talking about with rearranging your furniture or your artwork. You can also rearrange your orientation about how you engage with the world, because if you really look at your habitual patterns, and I'll speak for myself here, what I have learned to do over most of my life, and there are many reasons, family history, injuries, trying to recover from those things. what I learned to do is basically operate from a mode of self-protection. And that became the complete way that I engaged with the world, or more accurately, disengaged from the world. It was an act of self-protection always. And so what that would look like is I would pretty much always try to be neutral, try to be the peacemaker, try to be agreeable, avoid conflict, all of those kinds of things. And after many years of operating that way, again, out of self-protection, I started to believe that that's who I was. And this is something Masami knows well, that I spent a lot of years doing that. So for me, my ideal for myself became a reflection of this self-protection. So I might kind of imagine myself being calm and speaking in this serious manner and being spiritual and detached, things like that.
Oh
And
man.
so you can see that, you see why she's laughing, because she lived with me throughout all of this. And the thing that's starting to really show up for me, and again, this relates back to the armoring, this whole bigger theme of this month, is that for me, what I have only recently, just in the last few months, you know, we talked about look back 6 months to see what were you setting in motion. And for me, what I was setting in motion is letting down this particular pattern of self-protection and armoring up that way. And so what I started to realize is when I get in front of people and I'm giving a presentation, or I'm talking, or I'm helping somebody through a situation, I'm actually a lot more animated than I give myself credit for. And so this other way of holding myself, this calm, serious, spiritual, detached kind of way, is actually, it's a little bit of a mask. And it's a shape that I hold. Like I said, it came out of a pattern of self-protection. But what ends up happening is it takes a lot of energy to stay in one shape all the time. And I don't want to discount how much energy that actually uses up. We're not these staid kind of things where we're just stuck in one form. We're dynamic, we move. So for me, that's been the challenge. And that's what this whole period that we're talking about here, we're just framing it in terms of the Mercury retrograde because it's happening right now. But it's an invitation really to look at how can you move differently. And that's for me how it's showing up, is that, wait a second, I am not just this flatline person. I actually do get passionate about certain things. I actually can get animated, and it's not going to hurt anything. It's okay. Nothing's going to break, right? So I just wanted to bring that in. And I had one little thing. Masami probably has plenty to say, but before she does, because that was almost an invitation for her to comment about my patterns, but I wanted to share one thing really quick. And it was this story that I came across. I love this story. I want you to listen to it closely. There's not some deep, well, there is a deeper meaning to it, but, and I'll say a bit about it. It'll just take a minute to, I'm going to read a short piece of it. But I want you to think about this in terms of perceptions that we hold and how we can believe that something is true because we're so familiar with the way that we look at it. Okay, so that's a little setup there to this story. So the context of the story is that it's about this very famous statue in Khartoum in the Sudan. And this is particularly during the time that the British had a very strong influence there. And it was one of the most famous sites. So it was the statue of General Gordon, who was one of these great British generals, great in the sense of he was responsible for a lot of the disastrous colonial policies that happened in Africa. Just wanted to be clear about that. So there's this statue of General Gordon in Khartoum, and there's this little boy, and he's 3 years old, and it's his favorite thing to see. So he goes out with his nursemaid every day to take a walk to see General Gordon. That's what the walk is about. We're going to go see General Gordon. And so eventually the day came when the family had to leave Sudan. And the nurse took the little boy back to say goodbye to General Gordon because it was his favorite thing to look at of all the things that he saw in his walks. And so the little boy stood there for a while, just looking at the statue. And then he said, "I shall not be seeing you again for a long time. So goodbye, General Gordon." And then he turned to his nurse and he turned back and he looked at the man on the camel and he said, "Nanny, who is that sitting on General Gordon's back?" Just let that settle in for a moment. "Nanny, who is that sitting on General Gordon's back?" So he loved seeing General Gordon on these walks, and it never occurred to the 3-year-old boy that the camel wasn't actually General Gordon. It was the guy on the camel. So anyway, take that as an invitation to look at what are you not seeing? How can you reorient yourself to what you've taken as completely familiar, maybe even see some new wonder in it? Because that's one of the things that happens when we shift perspectives and we start noticing more of what's actually here, is that we become completely astounded by not only just the complexity, sometimes the simplicity of things, but also the beauty of things that are right in front of us that we look past because they're just in our scope of vision every day. Okay, so just take that invitation for what it's worth and apply that at this time where on a cosmic level, we have a little shakeup happening that's asking us to look at things a little bit differently.
Yeah, I see. Thank you for sharing. I love that story. And I think that's why the Mercury retrograde is like, hey, what if this is the time for you to put yourself out there? How about that? How about you? So many spiritual teachers say, repeat after me kind of thing. Like, I am the universe, right? I am all things. I am God. I am love. And I'm thinking to myself, but when there's a Mercury retrograde for 3 weeks, we all just kind of go, oh my gosh, we can't go out there. We can't send the emails. Oh my gosh, we get kind of, we can't be traveling. No, guess what? We'll be traveling this coming Friday. And we're super excited because we're going to travel when a lot of people just are not traveling, right? So this is the opportunity. It feels like, one of those highways that clear out after, what is it? Like after the holiday, maybe everybody's like eating their leftovers, like the, Christmas morning or some, I don't know, that when it's like, it's not so busy. It's kind of like that. The highway opens up for you during Mercury retrograde. So go drive, go for a drive, go out there. Put yourself out there. The stuff that you've been always wanted to do. Don't just stay in this inside mode. That's what we wanted to really emphasize, because you can't get too caught up in the prognosis of the Mercury retrograde. It's just the diagnosis. Okay, it's a Mercury retrograde. What you do with it, it's really up to you. So that's, I want you to be excited about it, right? Okay. You got 3 weeks.
I've got a quick little quote that I wanted to throw out there too. This is from one of my favorite writers. And it's along the lines of what Masami just said actually was a great setup for it, because we get into this mode of assuming that because we've heard information in a certain way, we've been formed and shaped and cultured and educated in a certain way, that's the only way that things work. And so just listen to this quote. It's a good one. So, when fortune knocks, open the door, they say. When fortune knocks, open the door, they say. But why should one make fortune knock by keeping the door shut? Okay, why should one make fortune knock by keeping the door shut? So why limit ourselves? In other words, why do we hold these self-imposed limitations? I'll give another personal example of this. And this was from many years, 12 years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago. I went through a period it was a very dark time for me personally, physically, mentally. And during that time, I had put on a lot of weight. Nothing seemed to be working well for me, just anywhere. Masami can attest to this. But one of the things that started happening is at some point I got sick of it enough that I started trying to do something differently. And the first thing I started trying to do differently was exercise. I was growing up, I was always a runner and I loved running. And so I decided to start running again. And when I did that, I did indeed start to lose some of the excess weight that I'd accumulated. But I got to a certain point, which is still quite a bit more than I am right now. And I started to get a little comfortable. And I said to Masami, well, this is good. This is good. I know I tell myself this. I think I'm reaching a point where I can live with this. This is comfortable. I can kind of fit into the clothes and I don't have to work too hard at it. And yeah, I think I can settle for this. And Masami would say to me every time that I actually said it out loud, why are you defining a limit when you don't even know what the end of this could be? So even then she was very wise. And she would say these things to me and it would throw me off a little bit. And I would have to say, well, I'd have to, well, because I'd immediately have to justify why I said that, because that's how I learned to be in the world. Someone asks you a question, you answer the question. And so, she's like, no, I don't really care what your answer is. Just think about, why are you limiting yourself? Why are you giving yourself an arbitrary number and letting that be what you settle for? And Tracy just noticed that that's the key word. Yes.
Keyword being settle.
Yeah. Yep. And so what happened, just to finish this piece of it, is I took her words to heart and let go of that idea that I had arrived somewhere. And what if there is further for me to travel still? And sure enough, as we started to change more and more, and then this coincided with Masami's MS diagnosis. And as those two processes of us starting to live a cleaner, healthier, more sustainable, supportive life together, that natural equilibrium continued to express for me, to the point now where I have reached a point where I don't have to work at it. I still do things to maintain myself. I do take care of myself every day, but I'm not having to fight against an idea of it, how it's supposed to be, because now by nourishing myself, my body, my spirit, it takes care of me again. It returns that to me. So that's, I'll stop with that example.
Well, I mean, just to give a number, when he said, I'm done, I think this is it. This is probably as good as it gets with my weight. Well, guess what? He's now 25 pounds less than when he put that line, right? So we just don't know. We don't know. We have to be a little bit more open to what we're being led to. So show up, right? And Richard is showing up for himself. He says, I have agreed to accept an invitation to appear on the Artist and Authors online TV show that I have been on before. Yes, I have seen that. I choose this Thursday, just waiting for confirmation. Great. So, just put yourself out there if that is what you want to do. Okay. But don't retreat into for next 3 weeks. It's very good to take internal journey, but that can't be the end of the story. So, don't settle. Okay. And then one thing that Mary Bosse said earlier that I really wanted to say is that she was diagnosed with cancer. She said, that's kind of how I felt. I got my cancer diagnosis via email the night before Thanksgiving holiday when I was unable to ask, any questions basically. But since she has worked on herself, I know this for sure. I work with her too. And she, many of you know Mary, she is this beautiful light, energizing human being that, she did not take the prognosis and say, that's it, I'm the end of my story. I'm just going to go along with it. Because more you believe that, the more you're going to charge that energy inside you. And she did not do that. So, it's great to see those examples come up. And Diana, Chris says, to you, Chris, says, Chris, you are a very articulate person, very real and inspiring to me on how you can communicate your feelings.
I want to comment on that one because I read that. And, you know, Diana, this is something that for me has been such a struggle. I have to admit that. Because for all those things I mentioned earlier, for a lot of time, I blamed a lot of things for why I couldn't do that. I couldn't express. It was very hard for me to feel things. And so, you know, some of it has to do with the brain injury that I experienced. But you know what's so interesting is that by doing things in a different way, and I'm gonna give some credit to this neurofeedback therapy I've been doing because it's been really unlocking something for me. But that's the ability to start feeling things that we have lost connection with is really powerful. And a big part of that is how we reorient ourselves. So we talked a little bit in this month and past calls about mindset and how the mindset is it's the current set of possibilities that we see right now. And in other words, our mindset is our limitations. It's the container holding our current limitations. And how do we expand? We have to grow the container. And so for me, what that has meant is learning to feel again. And it's a very challenging process because it's both a physical and an emotional connection that I'm essentially having to relearn after being so disconnected for so many years. So I really appreciate that comment. The fact that it's coming across actually is really important to me. So thank you for that.
And she says, please accept the validation.
Take it.
Speaking
of validation,
for the last couple minutes, I actually would love to hear from all of you that want to chat into here. You know, because this month's theme was the armor, right? And cocooning and shielding yourself. So we are given this beautiful opportunity starting today with the Mercury retrograde to break free of that, right? So what do you plan to break free of in the next 3 weeks? What are you planning to share and what are you planning to do? And it could be an internal journey. That's fine. A lot of the words are great this time, right? During the 3 weeks. But what are you trying to do to break free of some of your patterns? I would love to see that come up. So
can I just read Diana's, while people are sharing, I wanted to read what Diana wrote back, which is, when I get emotional, I'm like a 5-year-old who's being told, use your words. I feel things so deeply, I can't find words. And Diana, if I remember correctly, you've shared some of your past history with injury as well. And I just want to say I can completely relate to that because that almost perfectly describes the experience that I had for so many years, where it was almost a painful depth of feeling that was going on internally, but the ability to express externally was almost non-existent. And the disconnect between those was like an explosion ripping through my system. And it was so difficult. So
will you read the Erlene's comment, please? And then Richard has something quick to say after that. So I muted him. So please.
Okay, so, okay, hold on.
And Erling, I read your early comment that came to me personally. That's a little bit hard to answer, you know, how many milligrams of certain supplements, but possibly we can go into that some other time. Okay. All right. But could you read that comment, Chris?
I think you've got Richard live. Why don't you take that first?
Oh,
He's
okay.
got his mic open.
All right, Richard, go.
Okay. I wanted to share the way I responded to something, trauma that happened to me 4 days before my 65th birthday. I was riding my bicycle going to a health food store to get some fresh raw honey, and a speeding pickup came and from behind me and hit me. And it was very rough, you know, hit me right in the sacrum, and you know, it was in a lot of pain, and you know, out in the street and everything. Got taken to the ER, and I was there for several hours. No broken bones or internal injuries, but a lot of pain, you know. But with my birthday being 4 days later, I had planned to go to a movie on my birthday, Friday night. And the only way to get there was on my bicycle, you know. But I decided I don't care. I'll manage the pain, and I'll be vulnerable. If anybody even touched my back, I would go in extreme pain. I decided I'm going to take the chance. I'm going to get back on that bike. I'm going to go and do it and experience it. Take my chances and you know, like getting back on the horse after. Oh, and it worked out.
Well, I'm glad it worked out. I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. Richard he's got some superpower in his body that I have actually seen. But it's that kind of thinking, right? You don't let these accidents and diagnosis dictate what you can do in your body, right? So yeah, and I think you're going to do great. So send me the email about your interview, and I'm going to look forward to watching that. So,
all right.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
And do you want to read some of those comments that came, and then we'll wrap up for today?
Yes. Okay. I'm going to scroll. My screen's jumping because a lot of you are sharing. I like Alan. Thanks for this one. He says, someone said that feelings never grow up. I like that one. That's good. And it sure rings true for me. Erlene said, this session has been perfect for me to realize how jealousy has limited myself in my personal relationships. So,
wow, that's really deep. Yeah, that's really good for you for kind of tapping into that emotions. Jealousy is a big one. I think jealousy keeps a lot of people small, ends up being very small.
We used to have this conversation, and this is years ago. I mean, this is probably right around the time we were first getting together. And I remember we had a conversation because somebody that Masami had known. Masami used to be a very well-known figure in the yoga world in this area when we first met. And there was somebody else a few years later that she had known and had sort of come up with in a way, who had gotten a book or a video program published or something. And I remember we had this conversation because it was about, well, can you still not be happy that this person they're succeeding at what they set out to do? Does that in any way limit what you can succeed in and what you're trying to do? And it was that whole thing. And we had a really great conversation reflecting on that, about how that feeling of jealousy can very quickly shut down our own sense of what's possible. And then we'll start just defaulting into these old patterns, whatever we heard told to us as kids, you're never going to amount to anything. Or, if we told ourselves that, you're never going to amount to anything. And so I'm going to tie this to one of the comments here, to recognize when I'm thinking it probably can't happen now because, and step forward. So when you feel that thought come up, it probably can't happen now because, and then you fill in your reason, step forward anyway, see what happens. That's what we have to do. We're somewhat doing it blindly, but when we really look at it, every moment of our lives is a leap of faith. I mean, really think about it. Do we actually know what's going to happen next at any given moment? We think we do, but that's only because we have habits and we have a history of being alive up to this point. Okay, but we really don't know what's going to happen next. So let's see, a couple other comments. Let's see, I'm feeling encouraged to step into a new role with an international online group to be a group leader for weekly programs on Zoom. So great.
Yay, congratulations. This is great.
Yeah, and another one, Ilka, freeing myself from the fear of being seen, showing up to share my passion and gifts of healing with the world.
That's it, girl. That's it, girl. This is it, Ilka. Keep going. You can do this.
Yeah, and from Lynn, I'm planning on returning to work next week after a year and a half. I'm not going to wait to send a preliminary contract to an author I'm partnering with on the book. I'm joining a weekly Zoom gratitude group.
Excellent.
Okay, so all of these little things people are reporting on here, they impact all of us, because every time that you do something in your world, in your work, it sends out a ripple. and that ripple touches all of us. So the more, just think of it this way, the more this group, even if it's just the ones of us on this live call, maybe it's even people that are listening to the recorded call, we're all touching each other's lives. And so the more that each one of us activates what we have the capacity to do in the world, it's going to touch all of us. It's going to affect all of us. And I want to bring up the challenge that I got from one of my mentors many years ago that I shared a few weeks back. And it was the question, what do you uniquely offer the world of tomorrow? Okay, what do you uniquely offer the world of tomorrow? And the world of tomorrow is not science fiction. It's not 50 years into the future, although it could be. It could be that your ripple is that big that it's still traveling. It's now. It's right now, because that's tomorrow from a minute ago. It's right now, right now. So how can you uniquely offer something to the world of tomorrow right now? Okay, couple other last comments. I'm ready to break free of trying to blend in with many of my family members. Next month, we have a wedding, which will bring many of us together. So I think it's time. Yeah, sometimes that's what it takes. There is weight and there's anchor weight. And sometimes we have to cut the chain. We both know that one really well. So yeah, you
And
have to.
can you read Nada's?
Yeah, Nada said, I'm going to let go of trying to control my environment and know every detail in advance of going somewhere to protect myself from what ifs. Yeah.
That what ifs can be a heavy backpack weight, isn't it? It's sometimes it's worth it to just list the what ifs, everyone, and remove them all from your backpack. Yeah.
Last comment, and then we went over time a little bit today, so we'll wrap up. But just to Nada's point, one thing I had to learn to tell.
Oh, thank you, Penny. Sorry. I was sorry, Chris.
Just blurt it out. That's okay.
Penny says, I just have to say, I treasure these Monday sessions. I do too. We do too.
Okay.
Thank
Final
you.
thought, Nada.
Okay.
This came to me a few years ago because I was getting caught in the what ifs. And I don't know where I'll use Masami's terminology. It must have come from inner wisdom, because it certainly didn't come from my mind, which was in complete turmoil at that time. But the phrase that came to me was, it's not even a sentence, it's just a phrase. It's not what if, but what is. Not what if, but what is. So if you can take notice of what is actually here, not the hypothetical, not what could go wrong, but what can you focus on that you can actually engage in because it's here, it's real right now. So I'll leave on that note. That's the last thing I wanted to say, except I'm putting up a link. Thank you to everybody who has taken time to donate. I just wanted to throw that out there.
All of you.
Yeah, one of the things that Masami and I, we've always valued this forever in our work, individually and together, is this idea of energy exchange. And so we want to keep offering this Monday. It's good for us. We love interacting with everyone. And we want to keep it free, but there are real costs associated with that, whether it's time costs or it's, Zoom or our platform that we're on, whatever it is. And so thank you to everybody who has given back. We really appreciate it because it does validate what we do, and we feel the gratitude, and it also helps to keep us motivated and moving forward with this. So thank you. And if anybody hasn't had a chance to do that, there's the link. You can also find it on our website underneath the replay. And again, thank you. Many thanks to everybody for showing up. And
I know, honey, we have to wrap up, but you got to read Richard's comment.
I have to find it. Okay, Richard, the day that I was hit from behind by a speeding truck while I was riding my bicycle was the day that the U.S. Court of Appeals agreed with our proposal for a certain piece of land to be our Indian reservation. I feel like I took the hit for the tribe because I could take it. Okay.
Yes, Richard, but
Thank
please
you,
stop
Chris.
taking the hit. Okay. Too many times.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Good. All right. I thought that was a beautiful comment.
And hopefully now you can receive, now that the land has been granted, and you can also receive from that as a blessing too.
Yeah. And, Jim says, just when you hear about other people, I'm happy when other people are become happy, and sad when others are unhappy, become unhappy. Yeah. Yeah, we all feel that. And, when you hear people's success, tune into yourself. Is there a little twinge of jealousy there? Is there a twinge of like, oh, I hope that person will fall? I mean, we have those ugly thoughts. I have to admit, I had that like, about 10, 15 years ago, when this yoga person, around the time we started together and doing really well, I thought, oh my God, why am I still here? But I worked on it. I worked on my jealousy. Jealousy is a vibrationally very low vibration, everyone, really low. So this is where you got to bring the love back into it. And then I had to really deeply look into myself and say, why do I doubt myself? I can do things too. I can do it in a way that it's Masami way. Okay. And it's Masami brand. And so it's happening, it's unfolding, it's a constant work, but just tune into yourself. Can you seriously be happy for somebody? If you're having a hard time with that, try it for next 3 weeks during the Mercury retrograde. Work on it. Okay. Because then your life changes. So let's take off our armor. Okay. And let's come out of the cocoon. Let's lean towards what you're here to be, what you're here to express, and enjoy this beautiful seasonal change. And let's not let that Mercury retrograde get to us, because we believe in the prognosis too much. Okay. So that's what I have to say. Chris, I'm going to give you your last word today.
The last word, I put it in the chat.
You're on fire today.
Because this German word really sums it up. It's Schadenfreude. And Schadenfreude is essentially taking delight in the suffering of others. Now, we all know somebody who does this, if it's not us ourselves. Okay. And it's enormously energy intensive. And it takes so much of what we could do to transform our own lives when we put it into delighting in the suffering of others, like somebody who stumbles that's been successful, for example. All
right. So let's erase those thoughts, Chris.
Yep.
Let's replace it and we'll end it.
That's right. So we want to put our energy forward into how we can express our capacity to be completely here as we're meant to be in this world, and not lose it into that deep, dark hole, which sometimes feels very gleeful. But let's not give it away like that.
All right.
That's all I've got.
Okay. Well, we are going to be taking a little vacation this coming weekend. So we won't be around for the next Monday, but the Monday after that, we'll be back. Okay. So we want to hear about what you're doing, what you're putting out in the world. Happy Mercury retrograde to all of you. Bye.